Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Paint with Sean. So today we are continuing on our lone tree landscape. So we've got a great sunset that we've put together. Today we're going to focus on the horizon line. So we're going to be adding in a very faint mountain stretch. And there's a layer of clouds that sort of separate this mountain and that mountain. And you can see them in the background. They're kind of a orangey gray greenish color. So we're going to mix up some of that today, get that together, try to get into our closer mountain range here. It's a very bluish color and it's got some pine trees, and then there's a little lookout tower, and it has some very small poles that you can just make out. So that's what we're going to try and accomplish today. Get a good bit of that coming forward down onto the canvas here, and then we'll have that little bit of, you know, this little ridge here, and kind of a pinkish, real light pinkish white in some of these darker bluish colors. And then the very last piece we'll finish off with our front rocks and our big giant tree. So thanks for following along with me. If you guys are new to the channel, I appreciate your time and welcome you. And today we're going to continue working on this. But if you would like to continue with us, subscribing is a great way to do that. Let you know when all the videos are coming out, as well as you can go back and check out some of the previous videos. These are step-by-step paintings. So every piece of these paintings are put together so you can see how they're made and you can try to recreate them yourself. So sometimes I use a picture like this, sometimes I make them up myself, but we're just having a good time today. So we're going to continue along with our horizon line here. I'm going to pull some of these colors out. So I've got my just a forest type green here. This is also going to be very light in nature, so I'm going to get my white in there. And I do actually have some orange, and this is going to sort of turn it a little more of a brownish color. So any kind of the reds and greens together usually go more in the brown nature. So be careful as you're mixing your colors. Be aware kind of what that may come out to be for you. All right, and so I'm gonna touch a little bit of the brown into this really and kind of dull it down. So a lot of this, guys, when you're painting, is really getting the colors to be what you want them to be, and really playing with the blends of various colors. You know, we're all familiar with the you know, yellow and blue make green, and yellow and red make orange kind of thing. But when it comes to 3 or 4 colors going in there and then adding blacks and whites to go up and down in that nature with the various saturations, boy, that's really where it comes in. So I think I have a kind of a close color in here. I still feel like it's a little bit too green, so I'm going to add just a tad of my brown into that, maybe a little more orange, because we're really looking for kind of a lighter gray color. And these colors tend to dry a little darker than what they seem when you put them on the page. So again, I just want to go real light with this. So I've had quite a bit of white to this, and I think we've got a fairly close color. So we're going to make some broad strokes coming across here with our fan brush, and then this is very misty. There's no real hard lines, or there's a couple of streaks in there, so it's okay if we've got some value difference within this. But I'm going to get a base color put on here, and we're gonna kind of follow along with our horizon line here. Okay, so we don't have to come too far up over it, and we are going to add a little mountain range at the end. So we just want to kind of get this color up in here and add into some of this horizon as it breaks down into the bottom areas for us. Okay, and while this color is wet, you can blend it, but you can see this is a very distinct hard line that comes out in here. So when we put our mountains on, this is going to actually be on top of this little edge. So I didn't want to come too far up into my sunset, because I am going to continue already adding more into that. So I feel like I probably didn't make enough of this color for myself. So that's something else that you guys can experiment with a little bit, is mixing enough paint. Sometimes you want to use, you know, a good amount to really get it in there and cover everything. So when you have big areas like this where you're trying to cover it, I highly recommend to mix a little more than you think you need. It's okay to not necessarily use it all, but trying to recreate this same exact color, it's going to be a little challenging for me. So I'm really pushing this in here, and everything is horizontal. Okay, so all the brush strokes are horizontal. I'm not trying to really create any kind of brush strokes, so that's why I'm okay with having a little bit less paint on here as I get down to the end. And I can grab a little bit of what's left on my board here. Okay, but I really want to kind of allow this to vary in lights and darks. Okay, and the scrubbing motion eliminates all the brush strokes, so you can see how my brush is flat against this. I'm actually using the bottom of the brush instead of the top. All right, so this helps eliminate some of those brush strokes. Okay, and again, we're just sort of creating the color here. We're going to come back in. Ooh, there's some of that. I flipped the brush over and it pulled off some of the other green. So that's kind of cool when you can play with different parts of the brush and it ends up being various colors that you mix together that didn't get quite blended correctly. And that's awesome because it creates depth in the painting. It creates a way for us to see highlights and lowlights and that sort of stuff. So, all right, so we've got our sort of back color in here, and again, not exactly what I want it to look like. Okay, so I've got this base color in here. I want to lighten it up. I feel like it's a little bit dark for me, and I'm going to throw in a little bit more of the orange color. Okay, so I really want to give this a little bit of a reflection from some of that sunlight going on our horizon line. So I've got a little bit more of an orangey color. Put a bunch of white in there and just kind of dull it down. And okay, so I don't have a ton of paint, but this is going to allow me to sort of distribute this over the top. So this darker color, I intentionally made this a little bit darker than I really wanted to, and I've got some brush hairs. We're gonna get those. Not trying to make some details, so let's just do this. Boom, instantly dissolved. Okay, so while it's wet, you can really manipulate the paint. Okay, so we're gonna come across this, and I'm just gonna go real light with this. Okay, so I don't wanna completely cover up all that green that's under there, but I'm just toning it down a little bit. And because I don't have a ton of paint on my brush, this is going to create uneven strokes. Okay, so you can see sometimes it's lighter, sometimes it's darker. All right, and I'm just adding a light layer over the top of this to sort of dissolve it a little bit. So it's not quite as green as it was. Okay, and I'm running out of paint here, so let me grab some more. I'll come over on this side, dissolve this in a little bit, and this is still fairly wet, so we're able to blend a little bit. Okay, and you can see that this thin paint, when you don't have much on your brush, it'll dry pretty quickly on you. Okay, so you got to move fast. All right, and I'm just gonna throw in some of that. That looks great. I really like that. Okay, so we've got a couple of these that are a tad bit darker, so I'm just gonna grab some of that orange in there, tiny bit of the brown, give us just a little bit of a darker tinge to that same color we were trying to use. Okay, not too much. I'm still going to keep it fairly light on the board. Okay, we just got a couple streaks here, so we just want to put some indications of those. Okay, so just sort of come across it with this little more of an orangey dark color. Okay, just a couple of little lines in here to break up the flavor. All right, and then we can just come across sideways and dissolve that. Okay, so we get a little bit of a, you know, dark and light thing going on here, and maybe this side's Gonna have a little bit more of that. Okay. Just to sort of flavor it up a little bit. Oh, there's a nice little spot. Okay. So again, a lot of art is creative. Okay. It's not necessarily just copy and paste and be fine recreating somebody else's stuff. Make it your own. Okay. This is not exact. All right, again, this is even still a little more green than I want, so I'm going to throw a little more white on my brush here. And a tad bit more of that greenish color. All right. And I'm just going to stroke this again. Okay, so this is just several layers of effects. Okay, you guys can adjust this. If you ever don't like what you did the first time, paint over it. That's the magic of this. There's nothing concrete. It's not finished until you decide. And there aren't really mistakes. Okay, Bob always said we have happy accidents, and I truly believe in that simply because nothing is permanent on here. Okay, yeah, there are things that are going to not go how you want them at first, and I'm in several painting groups and social media, and a lot of the questions are, hey, I started here, but what do you guys suggest I could do to improve it, right? I don't necessarily like exactly how it looks here, so what could I do to improve it and make it, you know, a little bit better? And that's where the learning really comes in, and you get creative with things, is looking at where you're not necessarily at your best, and how can I emulate a little bit more of what I would like it to look like. Okay, and so you put it out there, and then you review, and you say, oh, what are the parts of this? You analyze. What are the parts of this that I'm not as happy with? Why do I not like how this looks? And a lot of times your own eye isn't enough. Sometimes you do need a little bit of help from some other people around you who have a different vision, because you decide how it should look in your head, and then you try to put that on, and you're like, oh, it doesn't match my vision. Why is this not looking right? And you can't figure it out sometimes. So going and asking for help is totally, totally okay. All right, so we got a good little color going on. Now, I want to put in this ridge line of mountains here. So this is a little bit more of a bluish green, and it's a little bit darker. Okay, so it's mostly on the green side. All right, but it is a little bit darker. Okay, so we're gonna tad the black. All right, and black also not just darkens, but it really kind of takes some of the color out. So you may have to add in an extra bit of the color that you're really trying to create if you ever add black to it, because black definitely does make it darker, but it also kind of grays it out, right? So if you're really looking for those tones, you want to make sure you got enough of the other color in there, right? So I'm just mixing green and blue and black, and I like the color, but it's not as dark as I'd like it to be, so we're going to go heavy on the black. We're going to make it a fairly dark color, but every time I put black in there, and I've already got that white color on there, so that's also what I'm fighting. I'm using the dirty brush method where you don't necessarily change it out. So I ran out of green. I didn't clean my brush, so we're going to continue darkening this blue-green color that we're working with here, and see if we can get this a little darker. Boy, I put a ton of black in this. But I've got that white in there, and they're just fighting each other. having paint wars over here. Just stirring it on the palette. So, okay. So let's see. We've got a color, but it's not near as blue as I'd want it to be. So we're gonna go a little more blue in that bad boy. There we go. So this is kind of a greenish blue gray color. We really want to make this stand out. Okay, so I've got the darkness in there, so that's helping. All right. So now I've got a lot of paint going on here because I want this to be one shot. All right, I don't want to have to come back and stroke it multiple times. So I want to have enough paint in here that I can go with a fairly crisp line. I don't want it to be very bumpy. If you don't have much paint on there, the paint can break. All right, and when you're not looking for a break effect, you want to have lots of paint. If you only put a little paint on there, then you can make some of these breaking actions happen where it kind of shows holes in this stuff. Okay, so I've got a good amount of paint on here. Just coming through, flattening out the brush, but it's super loaded with paint. All right, so over here I don't have too much, and then it gets a little bit thicker in the middle, and then we're going to come down to practically nothing at the end there. Okay, so here's our sort of bravery test. All right, so I'm going to keep this very thin over here, and I'll bring it up just a little bit in the middle. Okay, and again, you can see as I start to run out of paint, that's where the breaking starts to happen. Okay, and mountains are pretty forgiving. They're pretty easy to do. Okay, so I'm going to come back and get some more paint here, and I'm going to come in and I want a real thin line on the edge here. Okay, so just light pressure, and I'm just going to kind of connect my mountains in. Okay, so we've got our little mountain ridge line here, and I just want to blend this while it's still wet. So we're just going to take one of our fine brushes here. I don't know what the name of this brush is. And I'm just going to kind of come side to side and see how this is already starting to dry on us. So I definitely want to act quickly on these. Okay. I think this one's not going to work well, so I got an actual blending brush, so let's see if we can make this a small enough area. And just sort of blend this bottom out a little bit. Okay, and I'm pushing fairly hard on this because this paint is drying out. So I just want this to kind of fade together, and if we ever pull off too much paint, the harder you push on this dry brush, the more paint you're going to actually pull off of the canvas. Okay, so if you got some at the top and you drag it down a little bit and kind of fade this out, that's okay. We can always come back and put some more in there. Okay. So you can see I'm just holding the real tip of the blending brush here and just sort of diffusing this edge. I did get some new brushes. Very excited for these because they meet the exact need. So right now I need something that can blend this, and this brush is specifically designed for this. You can see how it's just diffusing this color. Okay, very, very important to have the right brushes for the job. So this got dry on me over here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to apply a little bit more color. Okay, I'm not going to make any difference in what shows, but I am going to add a little bit more paint back on there so that I can diffuse that edge. Okay, so I'll come back in here, and now that we've got some paint on there, we can just adjust it. There we go. Flip that back over. There we go. So just softening that edge up. All right. And it's sort of mixing with the color that's below it as well, which is perfect. That's what we're looking for. Okay. Now again, this is quite a bit darker color. All right. So this really gives us that stark contrast along the horizon line of what's going on. And this may be a little darker than I actually wanted, but that's okay. We'll just continue working with it. All right. So we've got our little mountain ridge line going on here, and I didn't keep the edge quite as fine as I'd wanted it to, but that's okay. Again, we're taking creative license here, guys. We are our own artists. We are creative and we get to do things as we want them to be. So I think the color is okay. It's again, it's a little bit thicker than I wanted it to be, but that's all right. So I'm going to clean off my fan brush. I really like the fan brush a lot. It does some really good things. And I'm going to clean off my board here, and we're going to get into our paint knife just to kind of speed things up a little bit and distribute some big paint along this whole area over here. So when you're working with big areas and you don't want to have to reload a ton on the fan brushes or whatever brush you're using, you can use other bigger style brushes. You know, I've got a 1.5 inch and we can, you know, make some real big things, but it kind of is hard to do the detail stuff. So this knife really is a fantastic tool for that. Okay, so we're gonna start about here, and we're gonna come up into most of this being covered, and then it sort of drops down into here, and there's a little bit of a mountain ridge over here, so we're gonna kind of paint back into that before we put in our mountain ridge, because it does actually show a little bit in the back over here. Okay. So at the edge of this, I want to have a little bit of a white and kind of a bluish color going on. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I never really show you guys how I do this, but if I get too much paint in the way, I literally just scrape it off and wipe it on my paper towel. Okay. So you can see my palette is every color under the sun, which I kind of like. It's fun. It's like a representation of my past paintings. So there's a lot of professionals out here that aren't going to waste your time showing you this kind of stuff, but I really like to just record what I'm doing in the moment. Okay. All right, so I got a big, fairly dry space on my palette here. So we're going to make a little bit of this bluish white color under here. And I used most of my white, so we'll throw some back on the board. All right, and I don't want this pure white. It's sort of a blended color with the blue. Okay, so I'm going to pull some white out, put some blue into it. The blue's going to be very strong, so I'm going to put a lot of white in there. I just want it to be fairly light color. Okay. All right, so we've got our sort of bluish white color going on over here, and we're just going to have a couple strokes that come down here, and then there's a darker ridge that comes in front of it. Okay, so we won't have too much of this, but just like Bob, okay, you're just going to come across, okay, and you're just kind of scraping this little roll of paint onto there. All right, so sort of in here, and we want to follow the lines that the ridge looks like it has. Okay, so this comes sort of over here, and when I say follow the lines, we want to come at the angle that the mountain looks like it flows at. Okay, so I'm just putting a little bit on there. I'll grab the rest of my paint here, and this is just going to kind of come down here. And again, guys, we may need to apply a couple of different times to get it to really cover everywhere we want and look the way that we want. We get some lights and some darks in there. Okay, so I'm just kind of following this edge, getting some color put on here. Now this top edge needs to be soft, right? It just kind of dissolves into this upper layer here. Okay, so with that same blending brush that I was using before, I'm just going to tap in this top edge. Okay, so just a little bit. I'm going to wipe this off a bit. I've got more paint than I want. Okay, I'm just blending it in. All right. And you can also use your finger if you want. I do that every once in a while. I just kind of play with some things. Okay, and then I'm going to actually come back over that with some of that green that I'd wiped off. So I've really just got some still on my paper towel over here. And that's a little bit of a darker color. So I'm literally going to cheat, wipe it off the paper towel, grab a bunch of white, okay, and lighten this up. Here we go. Okay, so we're sort of getting back to that same green that we had before. Trying to just give it a little more paint to work with, remember? So we're just going to lighten this up. I'm going to throw a little bit on there. This is that green. Okay. And this blending brush being dry will actually pull the paint off. Okay, so where these connect together, as long as your brush is dry, it will actually pull off the paint. So this allows them to kind of meld together in this area. Okay. All right, so we've got a little bit there, and then we need some dark in there. So I'm going to throw a little bit of black into my mix, some blue, make a real dark blue color here. All right, and again, we've just got our little roll of paint here, and we're just going to put a little bit in here. All right, just a tad to give it some color. And we're just sort of adding it in just very light touch. Okay. We just want that paint to break a little bit, just like faraway mountains, if you've ever seen me do those. Okay. It's the same effect, but this is a smaller thing. Okay. So my blending brush, I'm just going to take the top off of a little bit of that. Okay. Kind of dissolves it over into here. Got a little more in it than I wanted. There we go. Okay, so once you get some paint on here, you can actually kind of paint with the blending brush until you dry it off again. Okay, so I'm just pulling off some of this dark and creating a little bit of a lighter effect in there. And then I just dry it off just on the thing. So it may contain a little bit of the other paint, but that's okay when we're looking to sort of break things up like this. Kicking my heater under here. Okay, so we've got a little bit going on in here. I'm going to lighten this up just a tad. Put a little bit of highlights in it. Okay. So again, I'm using the same color. I'm just adding white to it to create a lighter value of it. Okay. Let's get a little of that. Just add a little bit. Just real light touch, okay? I just want to break this down a little bit. Okay, so sort of a variation of that dark and light area thing going on. Okay. I'm just going to use this little brush. It's got a good edge to it. Kind of diffuse some of this so it doesn't look so brush strokey up close. We want this to still look fairly far away. Okay, so again, a dry brush will diffuse color, but if you have too much on the brush, you can actually just distribute that paint again. So it's one of those you have to play with a little bit. Okay. So wipe that off, and again, it just blends right out. Okay. Beautiful. All right, so we got a little bit of a darker green edge color coming on, and it really matches the same color that we have kind of up here. So again, I've got this same color over here, but I don't have enough of it, so I'm gonna have to make some more. So it's really just a bluish green, tad bit of black, but once you add the black in there to darken it, you have to add a lot more blue and green to get the color back. Okay, So playing with mixing colors, guys, that's a lot of the fun that we're working on today. All right, so we're doing a good job, though. We're making some progress on our little painting. So I hope you guys are having a good time with me. I'm definitely enjoying myself and really painting this for one of my buddies. I put out a little painting contest. Basically, people submitted the paintings, and whoever got the most likes on their painting was the one that I chose to actually paint. So this was the one that won. Okay, so we are going to come right into here, and I want to come just over this edge. Okay, and we're kind of coming down into this mix a little bit. A little bit of break at the top. And it sort of just disappears back in here. Okay, so I'm going to throw this in here fairly haphazardly because we're going to come back over with some other colors in there. Okay, and again, these are just base colors. We're going to have stuff that's going to overlap over the top with another layer of mountains that kind of comes in right through this range. Okay, so we're doing a good job here. We got it going. All right, and I want that a little bit more of a solid edge here, so I have to be careful not to blend it too much. If you tap this, it really blends. Okay, so you got to really have a good amount of paint on there to make a solid edge. All right, otherwise it starts picking up whatever's under it and playing in that range. Okay, we've got our little mountain range going on like that. Looks good. Put a little bump in there. Maybe another little one right there. You don't know. Okay, so we've got some things happening in there. I'm going to grab just a tad bit of white, give it a little bit of a lighter flavor. Okay, so we're just going to kind of put a little bit of this in here, break this up a little bit. And I'm just going to grab my other brush and sort of tap these. Okay, and the more I tap, the more of this color I'm going to pick up, so I have to be very selective with the tapping. All right, now we need a little bit more of a dark color in there, so I'm going to get a little more of the black, darken this up a little bit, and do the same thing. All right, so I'm going to have a little more of a dark color in a few places. And this just kind of creates some variation in the mountain. Okay, and again, we don't want to pull off too much. We just want to lighten that. I want this just a bit darker in some of the edges. So again, you can paint these in whatever order you want. But I am sort of just adding back a little bit more of a detailed piece to it. Okay. Some of these edges really want that highlight of the shadow. Really make it stand out against the other one. Okay. So I'm just using the edge of the fan brush here and kind of giving our mountain some flavor on the edge. Really darken it up here. This kind of gets a little darker over on this edge, so I'm going to use that same color. I like it. Okay. Oh, there's a light spot. So see, down at the bottom of that brush, we caught a little highlight, and that's okay. It just gives that flavor, gives it a little bit of depth and character to it. Let's get a little bit deep in here. There's some darkness going on, some light playing through. I like it. Okay, let's get a little bit more of our light color in there. So again, I'm just playing in this same value range, right? The same color, different value ranges is what I meant to say. So I'm just throwing some white in there, instantly turns it to more of a white, colory gray. Okay, and I want a little bit of that white, but I don't want it too bright. I still want it to be mostly green. So I'm going to throw a little more green in there. All right. And we're just going to have a few highlight pieces in here. And mountains kind of shape themselves, so it's sort of tough to determine a lot of times where things are. All right. And I'm just sort of tapping these out and distributing some of these highlight areas. Okay. It's starting to look good. I like it. Okay, so we've got a little marbling going on in there. Now, the last big piece I'd really like to get in is our big blue ridge line that we've got. Okay, so a lot of this is actually going to be covered. We're going to come sort of, you know, down in here, and I need to have enough of this ridge. I came too far down with the sunset, so this is also something you want to be aware of is scale. Where does this horizon line meet? So you can see on my iPad here, just below halfway, which is really to here. So it should have been about here. So I'm losing a good bit every time I bring these layers down. So you want to pay attention to scale and sort of how things are playing out for you based on the painting. So again, I'm not trying to do an exact recreation. This was just a fun inspiration of sort of something else to paint that somebody else took a picture of versus myself. So I think it's coming out fairly good. All right, so I'm just going to rinse this brush off here one more time. And this also gives a chance for these colors to dry out. Okay, so when you're doing over the top colors, you don't really want to paint wet on wet, which is what Bob does. It's a lot more difficult with acrylic paints like I'm using to actually get a crisp line, something like this, when the layer behind it is still wet. Okay, so the edge of this where I came and made the mountain edge, it's still wet. So when I come over this with some more blue, I really need to have this be fairly dry, or else it's going to pull that green into my blue and change the color. So I'm going to go with the very, very light colored, almost whitish blue on this edge, and then over here it's a little bit darker. Okay, so again, I'm just going back and forth in my whites and my blues and making some fun colors. We're having a good time today. All right, so I'm using the fan brush to mix the color, but I think I may apply it actually with the knife. So let's do that. So I've got this sort of blue grayish color over here. I don't care. I'm just going to mix right into it because it's kind of got some of the whites that I'm looking for. All right, so I put a bunch of blue in there. This is way too blue. Okay, so we're going to throw some white in there, and it just diffuses that color. Really diffuses it. Okay, so I want it even lighter than this. It's a fairly light colored blue. And again, I might even toss in a little bit of green with that just to flavor it up so it doesn't quite look pure watercolor. Yeah, let's get a little more green in there. I ran out of green, so it's got a little bit of a greenish tint to it. And this is part of the fun, guys, is playing with colors and really looking at them like, oh, that tint doesn't look like this, so what could I add to it that might make it a little closer? Okay, there's a lot of various shades, you know, blue-green is a thing. So straight blue may not always be enough. It's when you got to blend several colors to sort of get to the color that you're looking for. And I do this a lot where I hold it up to this to see what does it look like compared to what's on the picture itself. And if it's fairly close, a lot of times I'll use it. Okay, and this is a fun thing too. When you make up a painting, you can't really be wrong. It makes it very difficult for you to do it incorrectly because it's the version that you see. And people only know the version that you show them, guys, really. So you want to make sure that when you are doing this with yourself, and painting is really something you do with yourself, that you're not too harsh on yourself, because the vision you have in your head doesn't always have to match what actually comes out on the painting. So about right here is the top of my ridge, okay? And I just want to put this on here with this brush while I've got the paint on there, okay? And that sort of flows down there, and then it becomes white, and there's going to be a tree about right here that will change that flavor. So let's put pretty good dip into this. Okay. And we just come all the way across. All right. Now again, we're just kind of establishing where things are. This is not our finished product. So even though I know this is going to come down to a white color, it's nice to have this base underneath, okay? It's really nice to have something under it that isn't plain white, that can kind of change the flavor, okay? White really, and again, I've got some white on here that I want to cover up. Okay, so I'm just going to bring my edge of my mountain up just a little bit to cover these little white areas. Okay, need a little more paint there. So again, if it's wet, you can see it's starting to pull into this and make it a little more gray. So that's why it's very important to have enough paint to just make that full stroke. Okay, I'm just going to bring it up over the top of this. There was a little bit of white in there that I didn't want. Okay. And then we're just going to kind of coat in some coverage space. Okay. And again, we're going to come over the top of this with some other colors, make it a little more white and stuff. Okay, I got a little bit of white showing over here, and I want to gradient this out a little bit less of steep of a mountain. Okay. I want these edges to be fairly solid. I don't really want them to break. They're starting to get closer to us. Okay. So there's our little our little mountain ridge there, and then we're gonna come back in with some whites and really kind of dull this down a little bit. Okay. So again, our color is already, you know, wet. So coming over the top of it is going to blend, all right? So you can see this immediately lightens this up over here. And a real light touch. That's what I'm looking for, okay? And this is pretty well going to get covered with trees and things, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm just going to kind of pat in some of this and blend it. Okay, and we have a few little details and things, but for the most part there's kind of just a ridge of some of this, you know, slightly lighter color that comes up into this. Okay. And again, nice light touch will blend that out. And this wet on wet, again, is going to give you that opportunity to play with the color, play with the pressure. All right, and I'm not really wanting this to have too many brush lines. Okay. And this lighter color is a lot more down here. Okay. And this is also going to get a lot whiter over there. Lighter with white. So let's lighten this up just a tad down at the bottom. Okay, so it sort of has a ridge line that comes like this. And where it meets up over here is really going to become very white. Just soften those edges a little bit so they're not quite so hard. Okay. All right, so we're continuing to just play in our little blue tone here and just adding some of this lighter sort of color in here and soften this up. Okay. And again, this wet on wet allows you to really just blend things very easily. Once this dries out, it's very, very tough to get it to come back to what you had it as before. Okay. So we're really getting a lot of layers of things going on. We've got our little blue mountain ridge, kind of like that. I want a little bit of a darker streak in there. So I'm going to touch the black and come into it, a little blue. Okay. And just right here along this ridge line, we're going to sort of darken this a little. Okay, so just a tad. Come in with my blending brush and just soften that. So it just gives the indication of a shadow. And we've nearly blended it away. Okay, so just the indication of a little darker area going on there. I'm going to put some more blue into that. It's a little bit too grayish for me. So there we go. That's what I'm looking for. That's sort of coming up in there. Yeah, looking good. I like it. Okay. So again, we're just sort of blending our color by tapping. Use our little blending brush. We can kind of soften the edge down here on the bottom. Okay, so if you get too much on there, it's all right. Blending brush will take it right off for you. Okay, so we're doing good. We're getting some flavor into our little mountain here. I do still want this to be a little bit lighter down here, but we're losing we're losing ground. So we really need to have our pink mountain sort of come along here and come most of the way across. All right, so I'm not going to put too much more lower down in this area. Okay, it does have a good little trough down here at the bottom. Okay, just soften that. Okay, so again, I'm just tapping with this little fan brush. And I just realized I never actually did switch to the never switched to the palette knife, and that's okay. This is, sometimes you just get carried away in your own little world, and especially when I'm talking to you guys, you know, I really appreciate you being here, because that's a lot of what I'm enjoying about this is the sharing it, really getting to show people my work and what I'm doing, you know, with my painting skills. I guess I a lot of times don't think I'm very skilled, and I learn so much by teaching at the same time, right? I get to see how this little world plays out on itself, and so I appreciate you guys being here for me to share this with. So I'm just adding in a little bit of lighter color here on the bottom of this. Okay, and again, we don't want to play with it too much. We're piddling. That's a common word I hear in the painting world, is you can just piddle it, and we don't necessarily want to do that. But I do want to create little bits of highlights and lowlights so that there's some actual ridge lines in there. So my finger's probably not the best tool for that. Okay, just real light touches with my brush. Okay. All right, so this is coming along here. We've got our little blue mountain ridge going on, and then we've got our little lighthouse thing I think we might save for next time, just so I can appreciate your guys' time and keep that sacred for you. So thank you guys for hanging out with me on this. We've made some good progress here. We've got our, you know, diffused sort of cloudish area going on leading up out into that horizon line, and we've got some of our closer up little mountain ridges going on. So we're gonna leave it for here today. I appreciate your time, and we will see you in the next one as we continue our painting. Have a fantastic day.